The revelation I want to share with you begins with a number that most people never calculate, and that I believe is the single most important number in the financial life of anyone over 50 who is planning for retirement. The number is not your account balance. It is not your projected retirement income. It is not your net worth or your savings rate or any of the figures that typically occupy the center of financial planning conversations. The number is the real return on your overall financial position, the difference between the nominal growth of your assets and the rate at which inflation is eroding the purchasing power those assets represent. And for the vast majority of people over 50 who have never calculated this number precisely, discovering it produces the same reaction. A recognition that the financial position they thought they had is not quite the financial position they actually have. My name is William Grant, and I want to take the next several minutes to explain, as precisely and as practically as I know how, why this number matters more than any other in the financial life of someone approaching retirement. What it reveals that the standard financial planning conversation almost never reveals, and what specific changes in orientation, not products, not strategies, but orientation, would make the difference between a retirement that maintains its purchasing power and a retirement that slowly and invisibly loses ground to inflation every single year. Let me start with the distinction that I believe is at the heart of almost every significant financial mistake I have observed in people in their 50s and 60s. The distinction is between managing money and managing purchasing power. These sound like the same thing. They are not. Managing money means focusing on the numbers, the account balances, the portfolio values, the income figures, and measuring success by whether those numbers are growing. Managing purchasing power means focusing on what those numbers can actually buy in the real world, what standard of living they can sustain, what expenses they can cover, what life they can fund, and measuring success by whether that capacity is being maintained or grown over time. The first orientation produces people who feel financially secure because their accounts are growing, even when the purchasing power those accounts represent is quietly diminishing. The second orientation produces people who are actually financially secure because they are tracking the right thing. This distinction becomes most consequential in two specific circumstances. The first is when the investment returns on a financial portfolio are positive, but below the rate of inflation, which produces a growing account balance alongside a shrinking real financial position, and which is far more common than most people realize, particularly in certain interest rate environments where savings instruments appear to be working but are in fact losing ground. The second is when a retirement income stream is fixed, a pension with limited inflation adjustment, a Social Security benefit that indexes only partially, an annuity that provides predictable monthly income with no mechanism for growth, and when the expenses of retirement are rising at a rate the fixed income cannot match. In both cases, the financial position is deteriorating in real terms while appearing stable or even healthy in nominal terms. And because the deterioration is real but invisible, it is not felt until the gap between income and expenses has already become significant. The insight I want to anchor this entire conversation around is this. After 50, the primary enemy of your retirement security is not market volatility. It is not sequence of returns risk. It is not even the possibility of catastrophic financial loss. All of these are real risks that deserve attention and management. But the most consistent, most reliable, most inexorably compounding threat to the financial security of people approaching and living in retirement is inflation working on a financial structure that was designed for a different purpose, for the accumulation phase rather than the distribution phase, for growing numbers rather than maintaining purchasing power, for optimizing nominal returns rather than protecting real ones. The structural response to this insight is not complicated to understand, though it requires genuine change in orientation to implement. It requires asking about every significant element of your financial life, a question that most financial conversations never ask. Is this keeping pace with inflation, or is it losing ground to it? This question, applied to a savings account, typically reveals that the account is providing apparent stability with real deterioration. Applied to a fixed pension or fixed income source, it reveals that the income will buy less each year at precisely the time in life when healthcare costs, the fastest inflating category of personal expenditure for most retirees, are consuming an increasing share of that income. Applied to a bond-heavy portfolio in a low-yield environment, it reveals that the apparent safety of fixed income may be accompanied by guaranteed real losses that compound over the duration of retirement. What I have watched transform the financial lives of people over 50 who understand this insight is not a wholesale restructuring of their financial positions. It is a reorientation of how they think about the purpose of each element of their financial life. An asset that grows over time, a well-chosen equity portfolio with a meaningful dividend component, a rental property whose income adjusts with the market, a business interest whose earnings rise with the price level, is not just a way to accumulate wealth. It is a tool for fighting inflation. An income stream whose payments grow over time is not just a source of monthly cash. It is a hedge against the erosion of purchasing power that fixed income cannot provide. A deliberate and specific analysis of which categories of personal expenditure are inflating most rapidly in one's specific life, healthcare, housing, particular services, is not just budgeting. It is inflation triage, identifying where the threat is most acute and responding to it with the most deliberate attention. I want to be specific about what this means in practical terms, because the insight without the application is incomplete. The equity component of a retirement portfolio should include a meaningful allocation to companies with demonstrated histories of growing their dividends over time. Not because dividend growth is the only way to generate real returns, but because dividend growth is one of the most visible and most consistent mechanisms by which equity investors can observe their income stream keeping pace with inflation in real time. A company that raises its dividend 5% per year, consistently, over a decade, is providing its shareholders with income that grows faster than most inflation environments in the developed world. That is a hedge. It may not look like one in the standard financial planning conversation, but that is exactly what it is. The bond or fixed income component of a retirement portfolio should be examined not just for its yield, but for its inflation sensitivity. Very long-duration bonds provide high-yield certainty, but extreme sensitivity to inflation and interest rate changes. Shorter-duration instruments, regularly rolled over as they mature, sacrifice some yield predictability in exchange for much greater flexibility to participate in environments where rates are adjusting to higher inflation. Inflation-protected instruments, designed specifically to maintain their real value by adjusting their principal with measured inflation, are not the most exciting investment available, but they are among the most specifically useful for people in or near retirement who are trying to protect purchasing power rather than maximize nominal growth. The expenditure side of the equation deserves as much attention as the asset side, and yet in my experience it receives far less. Inflation is not uniform. It does not raise all prices at the same rate or in the same categories. Understanding which specific categories of your personal expenditure are inflating most aggressively and making deliberate decisions about how to manage exposure to those categories is as important as any investment decision you will make in retirement. Healthcare, in particular, is the category that most consistently inflates at rates significantly above general price levels, and it is also the category that typically becomes a larger share of total retirement expenditure as people age. A retirement financial plan that does not specifically address healthcare inflation as a distinct and growing component of the expenditure profile is, in my view, an incomplete retirement financial plan, regardless of how carefully it addresses the investment portfolio. The synthesis of everything I have described is a single shift in orientation, from managing the number to managing the purchasing power the number represents. That shift does not require any particular product or any particular strategy. It requires asking consistently and honestly whether what you own and what you are earning is keeping pace with the rising cost of the life you are living and will be living. It requires treating the real return, not the nominal return, as the measure of financial success. And it requires the willingness to make changes when the honest answer to those questions reveals that what felt like financial security was providing something less than that. You know whether you have done this calculation. You know whether you have asked the question about real versus nominal return with the specificity and the honesty it deserves. And you know what the answer is likely to show. The question, the only question that matters at this point, is whether you are going to act on that knowledge now, while acting on it still changes the outcome, or whether you are going to wait until the inflation gap has grown large enough that the answer is no longer avoidable.